When was the first risk that you took?
I went from one bubble in Florida to London, learned more of a trade, learned an industry, and then an opportunity came up in Dubai. I think that was the first risk because I was actually in a stable growth environment in London. Calculated, not sure. Jumped on a plane, thought it'd be a few years, but here we are 18 years later.
So for people who aren't aware of the company, what's the pitch?
We're trying to change the market for extended stay. There's so many people that come to UAE and they don't know how long they're going to stay. They don't want to buy all the furniture. They don't want to commit on a certain lease term and things like that.
How does Estee differentiate from any other platforms in this space?
You know, with Booking.com, for example, they're restricted in terms of the duration that you can book. We actually can book any period, like I say, from 30 nights through to the 1 year.
Raising money, trying to raise money. How's that been for you as a co-founder so far?
Yeah, raising money is a massive part of it because you have to get people to believe in your vision.
Hello, I'm Kieran O'Connor and welcome back to the Calculated Risks podcast. This is episode 5 and today I'm joined by Mark Reed. Mark is one of the co-founders of a company called Estee, who are revolutionising the extended stay market out here in the UAE and KSA region. Hello Mark, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today.
Hi Kieran, thanks for having me.
I've been looking forward to this one because you've been in Dubai for a very, very long time.
I have. It's basically, the wheels landed December 2007 and basically everyone was drinking champagne and having a good time. And I think everybody knows what happened after that. It was literally a month later, everything was a disaster. People were leaving, they're leaving things and Dubai suddenly became deserted. So it was a strange time.
Yeah, lots changed over that time, which we'll come on to now. I always want to start the same way and understand more about people's risk-taking tolerance, I guess. So when was the first risk that you took in your professional career and how did it feel and play out?
Professionally, I think risk-wise, it was probably just coming to Dubai. That was a big thing for me, although I'd lived in the States for a year and a half. I went from one bubble in Florida to London, learned more of a trade, learned an industry, or started to learn an industry, and then an opportunity came up in Dubai. And I think that was the first risk because I was actually in a stable growth environment in London, comfortable financially and in life, as it were, and decided that this would be a good move. Calculated, I'm not sure. That's probably the way I am. It's more like, yeah, let's do that. Okay, sounds good. Jumped on a plane, thought it'd be a few years, and here we are 18 years later.
I know a lot of people are considering moving to the UAE. It's very popular at the minute. Probably people watching this might be in that category where they're just about thinking about it. And I imagine you can think about it for a long time, weighing up the pros and the cons. What was the ultimate factor that you decided to, this is why I want to move to UAE?
Well, do you know, I think at the time, I think it was my granddad, and I was just like, got this opportunity, and he was like, well, what's the worst that can happen? If you don't like it, you come back, right? If it doesn't work out, you come back. You've got a safety net here, as it were, with your friends and family and everything else. If you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? Those kind of questions. And it really made me think that if you don't take the opportunity when it comes, then, you never know what could have happened, So I really think that was the catalyst for it. I think it was getting approval from someone outside that I trusted and everything else. And I think I've lived my life a little bit like that anyway, that, well, what's the worst that can happen? You can be spontaneous. The scenarios play out and what's meant to be is meant to be. And worst case scenario, I would have gone back to the UK, and that was the way it was. So that was it really. There wasn't any science to it or whatever. I mean, I actually landed in the business that I was going to be involved in. The investor dropped out pretty much as soon as I landed, and then after that, I was saying to my girlfriend at the time, and she was due to come over, and I was like, "Don't quit your job. I know you're meant to quit tomorrow, but don't quit." And she still went, "Oh, do you know what? Let's just do it anyway." And here we are.
Look at where you are now. Okay, so let's fast forward to now then.
Mm.
That was 17, 18 years ago where you took that big risk moving to Dubai specifically. What's your risk tolerance like now?
I think the dynamics have changed a little bit. I still take risks, but now I think I'm accounting for family. So my wife's always been the biggest support, in terms of the way I live. She's steady Eddie and I'm risk taker. And I'm also, well, there's a problem. We know there's a problem, but we'll work through it. It doesn't matter. We'll work through it, and not really sometimes having a clue how we're going to do that. And because I think sometimes when you've got some issues or some things that happen in life that are thrown at you, you try and take on the problem, the whole thing. And what I try and do now is break it down to say, okay, what can I control? What can't I control? And things like that. So my risk, I don't think my risk element has changed too much, but now my considerations are probably different. So I have a wife and a daughter who was born here, by the way. So it's very different because now I'm trying to take into account their needs, not just selfishly my needs.
Before we come onto the Dubai journey, let's go back to pre-move where you were living into the UK. Tell me about life before Dubai.
So basically, I graduated 1995, which is an age ago now, from Bournemouth, not one of the biggest academic hubs of the UK. But anyway, fantastic time at university. I was literally in a position where I didn't know what I wanted to do. Still, I was at the age 21, probably still even a bit immature as well. Lived away from home for 4 years or what, and but still not really sure what I wanted to do career-wise. And when my dad asked me, well, have you applied for jobs and things like that? I was like, no, I'm going to travel, I think, for some time, or I'm going to do this. And it didn't go down very well. I haven't put you through university to do this and da-da-da-da-da. But basically, yeah, that's basically how it played out. I didn't have any plan. And I think a lot of people had things planned. I didn't really have a plan. So I had a trigger point, and this was basically my mother and father split up, and threw me sideways a little bit because I wasn't anticipating it. And although I was 21, it still affected me quite a lot. And what it did, it pushed me to go and find something, find a new opportunity. And I thought, well, where was I really happy? And I went back in my head to a time where I went on a family holiday, and I loved the US at the time. And I applied to Disney, and I got in. I was one of, I think it was like 7,000 that were interviewed, and like 15 of us got jobs or something, right? And it just changed my life. It just, suddenly I was in the US for a year and a half, around people. Again, it was like a bit of an extension of university, around people wanting to have a good time. And it kind of parked my thoughts for a while, right? And, it made me think, well, okay, let's live for now and enjoy, and then see what happens next. And that's kind of what happened. I went into a bubble living in Florida. Knew that there was it was for a certain period of time, and I came back, and I didn't know what to do. I ended up in London because slept on a friend's sofa for about 5 months, I think it was. So we all moved to a bigger place, moved to London. Again, what do you love doing? I love travel. Right? So I went into the travel industry, got a job in Trailfinders, which is the biggest independent travel company in the UK. And spent a lot of time there, and that was my kind of early stage career, and how I transitioned from one thing to another. And then London became my life. Loved London, still love London, love visiting. It's changed a lot, of course. Don't know if I want to live there or do the commute anymore, but having done it recently, I'm not so interested in that. But yeah, and that was my London time. Was travel agency, learning a bit about the industry. got to a position of dead man shoes in corporate life. Got to dead man shoes, left to join an airline. Love that. And I was an airline representative. So that was good times. I mean, getting paid to take people. I was working for Finnair, getting paid to take people, corporates and travel agents and things like that, to Finland and take them skidooing and things like that. Get paid for it. Fantastic. So that was great fun. And then I got a call to come and do this in Dubai.
So what were some of the differences between the UK and the US when you were living in both places? I know it was some time ago, but I'm always fascinated by what move in location does to someone.
But to be honest with you, I was working for Disney, so it was kind of all taken care of. There wasn't anything I really needed to think about, so I didn't even need to worry about visas and visas, where I was going to live, and all this kind of stuff. It was just a program designed for the period I was there, so the difference is where it seemed really easy, if I'm honest. So compared to the UK, it seemed really easy at the time. Everyone around you was happy because most of them were all on holiday. So you had to sometimes paste on a smile. They used to call it the Disney smile, right? Paste on the smile, even if you're not feeling it that day and everything else, because everybody else was on holiday. I wouldn't have been allowed this either. So there were a couple of the guys who used to have to shave twice a day and things like that. So it was quite regimented and stuff. But it was my first. It was an exploration into corporate life, but it wasn't. It was still kind of party and fun and around people of my age and everything else at the time. I didn't have to do anything myself. I just earned money and spent money and had a good time. It was, like I said, it was a bit of an extension of university. When I came back to London, the difference was quite severe because I felt I became an adult. That was the biggest transition, I think, because suddenly I had to earn money. Nothing was taken care of, and things like that. And I think that was the first time I felt, wow, okay, this is the real world, right? I'm out of the bubble, and this is the real world, and I've got to earn some money. I want this and I want that. I was probably more materialistic in those days than I am now. In the sense of wanting certain things. Now my priorities maybe have changed, and I want things for my family, not necessarily for me. But at the time, that was probably it, and that was probably the biggest shock to the system, coming back and then suddenly like, oh, life's not that easy.
I've got bills now. I've
got bills to pay. Everything's not taken care of. There's no real safety net. Your family and friends are there, but there's no real safety net, and you've got choices to make, and adult choices. And so that was probably the biggest move. And then London obviously helps you grow up anyway, because you meet lots of different types of people and encounter lots of different situations, good and bad, and and it helps you grow. And that's probably the age I was at as well. Suddenly I was like in my early 30s, having had a good time, let's say, and kind of thinking, well, where am I going? What am I doing? And then, like we said, this an opportunity came up in Dubai. A friend was living here. Basically said, he was a number 2 in a travel agency here, and said, look, come over. Let's start a travel agency. Everything's based here on price, best price. Give me your best price. We can come over here and do something quality and sell on quality, not on price. And that was it. I packed up things and came to the UAE.
And we were speaking off camera about how much has changed over the last 17, 18 years.
Yeah.
Changed in the last few years, right?
Absolutely.
But at this point, you've lived in London, UK, and the US. What was like the first couple of months for you, like moving to the UAE in comparison to those countries all that time ago?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, it was, you've come from, mature environment, let's say, where everything is in place and a process, even silly things like Like now, well, in London, obviously, you get the tube or whatever. Everything's easy. Whereas you came to the UAE, landed, didn't even have anywhere really to stay. So again, navigating, options where to stay. I was, literally jumping from place to place to place, which was interesting. Also, there's no processes. So it was at the time when you would flag a taxi, for example. There's no metro, of course, right at this time. So you'd flag a taxi. They'd stop, potentially take you somewhere if you said you wanted to go a longer distance. If you wanted to go a shorter distance, you'd have to change the narrative because they wouldn't take you, right? They'd go, oh, no, busy. They keep the door locked until you told them where you were going. So you'd even have to jump in a taxi, tell them a different destination to where you were going just so you could get in a taxi. And everyone used to be manic on the roads. So just trying to get anywhere was, so it was challenging, right? The early days. I mean, now, roads are busy, but again, now you can use your phone and, you've got different options to catch a ride, or, of course you can rent a car and stuff. And so, that was tricky. It was just the simple things was what I mean. Basically were tricky and hard. We were one of the first tenants in JBR. It had just been built. And again, the process just to get anything, to get a rental and everything else was really challenging. All the paperwork required and everything else, it's much, much easier now. So I think its processes were the biggest thing back then. And sometimes you thought, am I the first person to have done this? Things like that. So, yeah.
So you said you mentioned you spent some time in corporate beforehand, and then you moved to the UAE and you set up a business. That was the first bit of experience you had doing business in the UAE, was something you set up.
Yeah. So basically, I was with another guy that had already been here. And again, in those days, it was different. There wasn't so much of a structure. So we were trying to set something up that traditionally had been done by, let's say, the big families and everything else. We were trying to start a travel agency. So there were different things we had to learn on the job, that we need this. And quite often it would be things like you'd be somewhere and it's like, oh, have you got this? And I know there's elements of that across the world anyway, right? And no, what's that? Where do I get that from? I'll go here, and things aren't always as simple as they play out. So it took like 7 months or something to set up the business, which is obviously sounds ludicrous now. But that's just the way it was. And it was, we felt that we'd done research into it. But there was always things changing because I guess it was evolving and growing, right? And if there weren't processes in place, they started to come into place. And it would be a time when you would ask person A something, they would say yes, and then refer you to person B, and person B would go, no, that's not how it works. So, and I know we've all had those kind of frustrations, but that's basically, there wasn't a process to follow. It wasn't as easy. So I think that was the biggest thing. Now you have lots of support, and the UAE is at the forefront of that, and Dubai, and it's probably another reason why you recently came. The infrastructure for startup is fantastic. There's opportunities to set up businesses quickly. They embrace it and everything else. So I think that was kind of very much in its infancy, and there weren't processes.
It's very interesting to hear you speak about how challenging it was and the lack of systems and processes, because we were speaking off camera, and
exactly.
I've recently been here, and it couldn't have been more simple.
Exactly.
To set up a business. The support I've had, the ongoing referrals, recommendations into doing the right thing, and it's been the simplest thing. Way simpler than I actually thought it was. Fascinating to hear. Yeah,
the transition has been amazing, and the way that UAE has embraced entrepreneurship, and and if there's opportunity, how they can facilitate it and everything else. So no, absolutely right. And there were corporate jobs obviously available here, but again, this was my first transition into entrepreneurship, and it felt comfortable from that point of view. And I think I'm one of those people that I like a bit of the unknown. I think that's part of my character as well. Sometimes maybe people would disagree with that now, but I think part of the character is that you have a challenge, to face, and I think solving problems is a big part of entrepreneurship, right?
Well, we know that business didn't turn out the way you wanted it to because you're with Estee now, but I'm sure you learned loads. So when you think back to that first business, the first project you took on moving to UAE, what sort of things did you learn from it?
Oh, huge. So I don't think I really realized how culturally different just being in the UAE and trying to operate a business would be. I was probably a bit naive in that sense. Also, you have a lot of things that you think are opportunities, and they turn out not to be opportunities. So you have a lot of back in the day, you had a lot of wasted meetings. I think, if I look back now on how many wasted meetings I probably had with false promises and yes, 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 no, but you didn't get the no. You're just waiting for the next thing to happen, or you're trying to push something and it just didn't happen. So I think the difference in doing business let's say Westerner to Westerner or whatever is we're quite straightforward. I don't want to waste your time, you don't want to waste my time, but if I can help, then more than happy to help, and vice versa. Whereas some cultures, it wasn't quite like that, and I think that took me a while to get used to and understand. Now relationships and things like that, it became very important to me in UAE, because also I'd landed, I didn't know anybody other than the other people that were in the business. So actually building relationships and things like that outside, trying to define if they're personal or professional relationships sometimes as well, because you're all in a melting pot, which is Dubai. I mean, I can't remember how many nationalities are here now, but it's a complete melting pot of different nationalities, different ways of working, and everything else. So that was really took a while to get used to and understand. And it would often be, who am I meeting? Okay, I'll allow half an hour, or I'll allow an hour, or you know what I mean. It would be things like this. And now I know, if we can speak to a decision maker and things like that, if you can get to the decision makers and things like that, it's far more important.
Well, let's stick on the topic of doing business in Dubai, because you've been here for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that you're talking to someone who's just moved here,
Yep.
potentially me. I'm 3 months in, I've learned a lot already.
Yeah.
But maybe someone who's just about to make the move. And I also actually speak to a lot of companies who want to expand into the UAE. What sort of advice would you give on doing business in the UAE?
100% just do your research. Don't take a cheap shortcut, of a false promise of someone being able to help you with this, because sometimes it's just sounding too good to be true. Take recommendations, so people that have used the service 100%, but don't actually spend more money trying to correct something if you don't take the right choice in the first place, if that makes sense. So I know you were speaking off camera, you were very happy with your company setup and everything else, and now you would recommend, right? And I think taking a recommendation from someone that's used the service is far, far better. And I know that's probably sounds a bit silly, but you get bombarded with lots of cheap options maybe, and they sound very interesting, but a lot of them will have shortfalls and not take you through the whole process. So don't try and skimp on it. And at the other end of the spectrum, you've got people that will still make things sound as too complicated just so you use their services, and they charge the other extreme. So it's a really tricky one. But there are good places to set up a business. Also, being here, I think, is really important to understand the landscape and learn from it. Because I think also, if you do everything remotely, I think there's also, issues there as well. So I think it's just come over, keep your eyes open, don't be naive. Also, don't be pressured into anything, because that happens a lot as well. Don't be pressured into anything, and just use your time wisely, spend wisely, because the money can go very quickly. And again, if you spend incorrectly, you end up paying again. And that's obviously a common thing. So just take a recommendation only. That was what I would say.
Well, that's some good advice, and I like the point about not buying cheap because you're going to buy again. That's great
absolutely.
advice. It's prehistoric advice, which is always ringing true. I'm curious though, as you're now a co-founder in a business, money is very, very important, right? You don't want to overspend on something.
Correct.
But you also cannot buy something for cheap, which then you have to buy again because you've paid more than you would if you would have bought the more expensive thing. So now you've got your co-founder hat on and your business owner hat on. How do you balance the two of not buying cheap, but also trying to buy the better service, if you like, when it's a price motivated decision?
Well, I've always been service over price, just as a person. But obviously certain factors and certain timings mean that price obviously becomes the most important thing. But then I think if you do your research well enough, and we go back to personal recommendations and things like that, and relationships. So I was part of a networking group when I first jumped to Dubai, which I think is actually a really good opportunity for people that have just arrived. And I joined a group of people that I felt I could trust, and they may have expertise in areas that I either didn't want to venture into, or that I couldn't learn very quickly. And so I would take other people's advice and recommendations based upon what they were saying, right? And I think then sometimes you may be paying more than the bottom price, but you know that you were going to get what you needed. And I think now same thing applies, really. Certain things are obvious. You pay. Let's talk hotels. But you pay for a certain level of hotel. You have a certain level of expectation. You pay for a particular brand. You have a certain level of expectation. And I think obviously balancing that out. So laying out all your options. We did it recently with for an ERP system. And we wanted to incorporate everything. So we laid out all the options, and we ended up with a short list of 7 or something. Right? We spoke to some. Again, we've got different skill sets within the business. So certain elements were like, right, what's your contribution? What's your opinion? What's your opinion? And let's try and get the tool that is best value for money for what we all need, and that will do the job. I think some people say, oh, well, I'll take that because it's free or because it's cheap, right? If it's not going to serve its purpose, then don't take it. But also, when you're doing a startup, it's like, where am I at now? And where do I want to be? Do I need the all singing, all dancing? No, maybe not. But maybe in 6 months' time, I might need it. Do I invest in it now? Or do I take something that I can build to that point on? Right? If you can't build and you've got to scrap it and start again, it might not be the right thing. So again, I think not jumping into something spontaneously and doing all your research is really, really important.
Yeah, I've heard from so many people that referrals and recommendations are everything over here. To do business, it's a small place, although it looks relatively big from the outside, and referral holds a lot of weight over here. So I'm glad that you mentioned that as well. And then secondly, it's a very interesting concept as a founder to think what you need now, but then also plan ahead for the next 6 months. And I've seen it many, many times, probably with me, myself, but also people that we work with. You might have an office space which holds 6 people at the minute because you have 4. The next 6 months, you hire another 6 more, and all of a sudden you're having to negotiate the lease and move out to a bigger.
That's a great example, actually. We did the opposite of this. We took a huge space and then tried to fill it. This was in a previous company, right? And then tried to fill it. And at the time, that was pretty ignorant at the time, right? Because we were never going to fill that space in a very quick time period, where by the time the lease would have elapsed and so forth. and we should have taken the smaller. But you're absolutely right. People do it the other way as well. But now also with the, I have an opinion as well that basically in terms of office and things like that, if depending on the role and depending on the, the commitment and the job in the job entails, actually having remote work, I'm actually quite pro remote work, personally. We even vary amongst the founders on how we feel about that. But, we're all about delivery, not necessarily, clock in at this time, clock out at this time. What have you done? It's all about more or less, what have you done? Have you met expectation? What are the deliverables in this? How can we support it and make it better? What's the outcome? It's not necessarily because you move here to try and have some kind of lifestyle as well. And now obviously everyone's on their phone 24/7. People expect things 24/7. So even in our business now, we're trying to automate as much as possible whilst trying to keep an element of, let's say, visibility as not a faceless entity. And I think you've got to find a balance between those two things, the customer service side and especially if, you are becoming a more, wanting to become global or whatever, you're on different time zones and things like that as well. So we're trying to automate as much as possible in our business.
So you're pro remote work. What about the other two co-founders in the business?
To be honest with you, I think there's a mix. So we've got some of the team in India, some of the team are in Egypt. So some of it has been, we're working with, again, like you said, we're a startup. So we have to make choices based on money. But also it's trying to find the, let's say, the best fit, right? So some roles can be remote, some roles can't be remote. So we've got people in Dubai as well. Also square peg round hole. When you do recruitment in a startup, it's sometimes really hard. It's like you might meet someone good, but you go, well, where do they add value? Can they fit into this role, or can we adapt this role to benefit the business with the skill set of the person that we're talking to, because they're actually pretty good. And so you make mistakes in recruitment as well and things like that. Sorry, I'm going slightly off topic there, but you want to take good people, and good people are sometimes very hard to find. Sometimes you want polished, sometimes you want people that you can nurture and develop, that fits your narrative and everything else. And sometimes you don't even know what the narrative is and where you're going to be. This is the thing, when you start something and you have an objective or an outcome that you want, you don't necessarily know how you're going to get there out half the time, and that objective may change, and you've got to be open to that as well, because at the end of the day, otherwise you're never going to succeed if you just go down one channel that isn't going to work. If you're not willing to change or transition in that period, then it's never going to work. And sometimes that means hard decisions like, people, getting rid of people, bringing other people in, other skill sets required and things like that, because you don't want to burn money, right? You're on restricted time and restricted money. So this is the challenge.
It's so complex in a startup or an early stage company, right? It's changing by the week, not by the month.
100%, yeah.
We need extra resource. We're over-resourced. We need to outsource because we're spending too much. All these things. Interesting topic, because it's been debated for the last 3-4 years post-COVID mostly. The remote working side of things. So I like that you're pro remote work. But for the people that are working remotely, because that position allows them to, versus the people that need to work in an office, how do you manage the differences there? Because, from my experience, some people might look at the people who are working remotely and say, oh, we would like to do that. But, that position doesn't allow it to. So how do you manage that from like a culture perspective?
I think just being flexible, again, like focusing on more the deliverables rather than the timing, right? It's not school, be here by this time, be here by this time. But if you put a meeting in, we expect you to be on the meeting, right? Don't put it in and ignore it. Or if someone puts in a meeting for you, then attend or decline it in good time, etc. And have, if you're meant to be, let's say, more conventional hours, etc., then obviously have a good reason why you can't attend. That's fine, So we have open, so we work on Google. Everything's open, calendar's open, etc. So that any team can book any of the three founders if they need to. If we haven't got anything in our diary, then obviously we can be booked. That's basically the rule of thumb, as it were. And I think that's the best way. And we try not to have meetings for the sake of meetings. I think that's the other thing that's really sometimes happens a lot. Meetings for the sake of meetings is always not unnecessary.
I think it's a good idea to measure on deliverables and outputs versus just time. I'm going to throw an objection in, and it's not my objection actually, but I'd love to hear how you would combat it. So, a lot of people that I've spoken to, from a friend's perspective, but also, client's perspective, they might say, "Oh, we want to measure on outputs." That's fine. So let's say, for example, a salesperson or a software engineer does 4 hours work in a day and is the same output as what you'd expect in 8 hours. Then some people think, well, imagine what they could do if they were here for 8 hours.
Yeah.
And then that's a slippery slope, right? Because
it is.
You've given them autonomy and freedom to work harder in those 4 hours and get the exact same work done. And now you want to push them into more, more. How would you combat that?
I think that's part of the recruitment and ability expectation, right? So we've recruited people that we believe could do a job based on meeting them, right? Whether it's face to face or on Google Meet or whatever. We've met them and have a certain expectation of them. Some have met that or exceeded that expectation, and others not. And I think it's very, very difficult that if you don't measure on results, and also those results might be inaccurate, right? So like you say, a day to do this, it might not be possible to do it in a day, right? For various reasons, there might be various roadblocks and things like that. So, but I think as long as there's communication and understanding on those things, if there's a problem, let's try and find a solution, right? If that means it's going to take another day, it's going to take another day. But if we don't communicate that and we just come to the end of the day and a deliverable is expected and it doesn't happen, then I think that's where the frustration is. It's more, if you need support, then voice, but if you don't say anything, which again is a cultural thing as well, right? If you don't say anything, then nobody can help you because nobody knows that you have a problem, right? I'm also, so we have CEO Osama, CTO Nimit, and I'm the COO. So we all have different skill sets, right? And so anything tech, then honestly, I'm completely lost. I'm the worst for it, right? If there's any opportunity to go and speak or do something, like this, then I'm first to put my hand up. But tech, nah, it's not for me, right? I'm really done with tech. So again, it becomes the other side, right?
And you mentioned it 2 or 3 times there, communication.
Yeah.
The most important thing.
100%.
Even if you're in office, especially if you're remote working, communication has to be as good as it can be.
100%.
Open lines of communication, the right tools in place to communicate as well. And that changes everything.
Yeah, I think if you've got the right tools in place and you know the expectation of, you try and keep a flat structure as much as possible to a degree. But if as long as you have, you manage expectation, I think both ways, I think it can work very well. So I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I think when I've had teams, I think, I've always had good relationships with my teams. Sometimes maybe I need to be a bit more disciplined on certain things, but I'm also very human because I've been there myself. If someone needs something or whatever, we always try and help. As long as everyone's working towards the same goal, I think we all align very, very well. I think it's when you realise that someone's not really on board with this, and maybe we could be doing better. And I think that's when the question marks a peer, you know. I jumped from corporate in London to startup in Dubai, and then when the first startup failed, let's say, then I went into corporate, and I really struggled because suddenly I was in an environment where I was being told what to do is probably not really the right thing. I think my expectations and what I was told from my role were not even remotely close to the reality of it, and I ended up being in a toxic environment, in a corporate environment, which was horrible, and wanting to get out again and be more in charge of my own time, my own objectives, something aligned with me as a business, and as a way of working. And I didn't take it very well, and it affected me a lot when I had to try and jump out of that. It was very difficult, and I kind of got pushed before I walked because it was an environment I didn't want to be in, and it was very, very apparent. And I think part of that was that the team all liked me. They didn't like the boss, who was my boss, and I was effectively caught in the middle, and I then became surplus to the agenda, as it were. You know.
Well, that'd be very tough, and it's equally as hard both ways, right? Going from startup to corporate, and then corporate to startup. It's just
100%,
completely different worlds.
100%, and I think that's sometimes when we interview as well for certain roles. One of the things the three of us look at as well is, can they work in a startup environment, because it's so different. You know, you have many hats, and some, you know, with all due respect, some people are one-trick ponies. They, you know, this is what they've always done. Some are, you know, order takers, or can't think for themselves, or whatever, or they haven't had the opportunity or needed to. And I think that's where I failed in corporate, because I wasn't an order taker, and I didn't want to be an order taker. And that's not being arrogant. It's just being realistic that some of us are different. Some of us are at different stages of our careers as well. And I think that's very important to note. You know, I don't think you should just start a business if you have no knowledge of an industry, or no knowledge of how to do anything. I think that's ridiculous. But you should get some understanding first, and then by all means, if you're brave enough, make the leap of faith, as it were, because it's a huge leap of faith, you know.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. And there's so many variables in recruitment, right? Trying to bring in the right people. But the one that you just mentioned there is someone who's worked at a bigger company who might be a top performer,
absolutely,
or doing really well.
100%.
It's so easy in the interview process to look at that and be like, they're great, let's bring that person in. But what most people forget to consider, including me sometimes, is they might have the systems and processes there already set up. They might be given 100% of the information needed to do the job, and they might have some hand-holding.
Yeah.
Whereas when you come to a startup, you might have to make a decision on 40% of the information. There are no systems and processes, and you have to work independently.
Yeah, and you have to build the processes, and you have to build this and that. So yeah, absolutely, you're spot on there. Absolutely. You can have people that you think, oh, they'll be great, and you realize that they're not appropriate, and they were good at what they were doing, but like you say, they can't maybe make that decision or make that thought process, or even understand what you're trying to do, you know. So,
and that's not, and often that's not down to the person.
No, of course.
It's actually down to just their environment that they've been used to. You know, with time, they would most likely be a performer there as well. But it's just a sudden harsh change.
And then you don't always have time, right? And that's the other thing as well.
Yeah.
So we always try, you know, and we've got some great performers, you know, really, really good. But we've also struggled in certain positions, and maybe, you know, we question, is it our expectation? Is it, you know, let's be honest, is it the salary we're paying, or whatever, or is it what we're expecting as output? You know, does it match, and things like that. So, you know, sometimes we have to question ourselves as well, on expectation and such. But one thing that I really love is a statement that's been said many times, is that surround yourself with people that are more intelligent than you, right? Or that can do other things that you can't. And I think that's so strong when building a startup. You need people with the different skill sets. You need people that are deep into one area of the business and people that are deep into another area of the business. And then you need vision. And that's where I think we've got Osama with the vision. I'm deep into one side of the business and Nimit's deep into another side of the business with the tech. So, and then you've all got to come together. And that's also where sometimes there's conflict as well, right? Because, you've got limited resources, limited time and limited money again. And you've got to come together with something that makes sense moving forward, so.
Well, this is a great introduction to bring it onto your current position with Estee. So for people who aren't aware of the company, what's the pitch? How do you tell people what it is you're doing in 30 seconds?
So cool. So basically, we're trying to change the market for extended stay. So extended stay is for 1 month and above, stays in any serviced accommodation. So whether that be a hotel or serviced apartment, for example. What we're trying to do is we're trying to basically digitalize this to make it really, really easy for people to book as many nights as they want, between 30 nights and 1 year, and basically pay one amount every month, and that's basically it. It's different from doing private residential in the sense that you don't have to commit for long term, right? So there's so many people that come to UAE because it's so transient. There's so many people that come to UAE and they don't know how long they're going to stay. So they don't want to buy all the furniture. They don't want to commit on a certain lease term and things like that. They can use one of our services with special pricing, for example. They can use one of our services for special pricing as well, discount pricing, and have a hotel room or a serviced apartment for a prolonged period of time or for a short period of time. Works very well.
Yeah, so talk to me about the ideal person who would use this platform, because I know that I would have fallen into the category being fairly new to the UAE, but like, who's going to be the perfect person?
Yeah, you would have been ideal especially your first month when you came, because you can give yourself a base, not have to worry about certain things. You're not overpaying what you'd pay on, say, daily rate in a hotel. You're getting a special discount. You've got all the services around you. You get discounts in the restaurants and things like that. All the perks and benefits. You've got a nice pool and gym to keep you in your safe space, as it were, from where you've come from as well. And then also you can be very central, so it gives you a good starting point if you've just come to the UAE, where you can then use it as a base, whether it's close to work or whether it's somewhere good just to give a base for exploring and so on. And then you can look at all the different areas around you and decide what's appropriate for you, whether you need a family environment or you're single with one other, etc., etc. So it gives you a good base and grounding, and you just don't need to worry about anything. It's one less thing to worry about, because I'm sure you saw the stress of finding a place to live. It's it's pretty stressful. So, if you can buy yourself some time, get all your documents and everything else, if you're waiting for your Emirates ID or whatever, if we're talking just for UAE, and then you might have more idea where you want to be, and that's basically where we come in. Some people stay for 30 nights, and we have 70% of our business, 70% of our bookings, let's say, are for longer than 30 nights as well, and people extend their stay because, by nature, we become conditioned, and this is easy, this is comfortable, and it's not until something else happens that they decide that they don't need this anymore.
So I know through what you've just mentioned, people might be thinking of similar platforms. I know we were open before that we used Airbnb just because that was the one that we knew. How does Estee differentiate from any other platforms in this space?
No, very good question. So basically what we do, we try and centralize all the options, a bit like booking.com does for the short stay. But we do it for the longer term stay. They're negotiated rates. So, with booking.com, for example, they're restricted in terms of the duration that you can book. We actually can book any period, like I say, from to the actual day, from 30 nights through to the 1 year. That's number one. Number two, when you standardize something, so if we refer to Airbnb are often obviously individual owners and things like that. What we do, we take managed Airbnb. So we partner with a company that actually already manage property. They standardize the product, as it were. So it's more like having a hotel room in different buildings and things like that. So you've got a certain level. And I think that's the only danger for taking an Airbnb. It's hit and miss, And if you're committing for a longer term, you don't want so many misses, If it's 1 or 2 nights, no one cares, right? Also, your needs are very different. So what we try and focus on is, if your needs for long term, you might need certain differences than if you're short term. So everyone will be surprised to hear that half of our business is literally people living in hotel rooms, so no kitchen. Some people will probably be appalled by that, and other people will be like, "Yeah, I don't use the kitchen. Think how often you cook or whatever, right?" And that's the reality of the way we live now. So we've got the digital nomads, So we get a lot of people coming for business, but they're on projects, things like that, or they're just coming to settle. So we're now doing B2B. We have B2B partners where the HR department or the PA or whoever will contact us and say, we need a place for Kieran for the first 30 nights, and this is the parameters on budget and location. Can you give us some options? So it's things like that. We're trying to automate this process, but at the moment the B2B is where the hand holding is, as it were, right? The B2C, when people come online, they're used to booking this way, right? They can book online, and everything else, and that's what we're trying to provide.
And I know a big part of the startup journey is fundraising. I know that you've been on a big journey over the last couple of years, trying to raise money. How's that been for you as a co-founder so far?
Yeah, raising money is a massive part of it, because you have to get people to believe in your vision or whatever. So Osama's the driving force of the fundraise, to be perfectly frank. I can't take any credit for that. Quite often I might have an initial meeting and whatever, and sow some seeds, but otherwise Osama's really the guru in terms of raising the money. So yeah, we're getting there on the journey of that. But and interestingly enough, we've got VC funding, we've got angel funding, we've also got a consortium funding us as well. So we've got 3 varied options so far. So it's been an interesting journey, because also when people want to deploy their money and what their expectations are, all 3 of those will be probably very different, in terms of what their expectation is and things like that. So where we're at now, it's good that we've established relationships with all these guys. But talking about fundraising as a whole, I think one massive lesson that we've learned as well is that basically you've got to talk to enough people. You've got to understand that it may not be that your business is terrible or whatever else, but not to take it personally. If if you get pushed back, if you get ghosted, which happens, and it's also to understand that if you keep in communication with some of these VCs and some of these angels and things like that, and keep them informed about your journey and where you're at now and things like that, things can also turn as well for the positive. But if you don't ask enough questions, if you don't ask why are you not interested, instead of, let's say, crying into your cereal and saying, okay, another one said no, then you won't learn from it. And I think that's really important as well. So fundraising journey is really painful.
Lots of rejection.
And sometimes it's can be quite hard to take, but you just got to dust yourself down and keep going and everything else. And if you've got enough people that believe in you, then I think the sky's the limit, basically. Yeah. It's hard to start, right? But once you get moving, and hopefully show some traction and everything else, things become a little bit easier, So, what we're trying to do is build our partnerships. So, we work with some top hotel brands, which really helps. So demonstrating that our let's say our idea is sustainable. I think that's the most important thing. We've also realized and understood that we need a wider geography. So we can be, Kieran can be our client in the UAE, but he also might live his life by living a couple of months in the UK or a couple of months in US or a couple of months in Asia or whatever. And we need to be that entity that can help him there as well. So we're trying to work out now how we move and keep Kieran as a client, and also support him in other geographies. So that's what we're working on now.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question about international expansion, because, just from listening to you, it sounds like a platform like this can go into pretty much any country, from what I've heard. So what does the next year look like, 2026, 7, for global expansion? What countries are you targeting?
Well, to be honest, our whole system, our whole objective of what we're doing is to be built on tech. We're a tech platform. So, so people can book instantly and everything else. So you're right, the sky's the limit in terms of geography. Obviously, we've got to determine what locations, what hotspots have the need, where we can support the hoteliers, where they have, extra inventory, for example, that they're not utilizing, which is effectively what we do as a business. We're trying to utilize inventory, and basically where we can create those win-wins. So what we're trying to do is highlight all the hotspots, make partnerships in those hotspots, and implement our technology to be able to then service people for those locations where we believe that are relevant. So 2026 is that for expansion. Saudi Arabia is our key focus at the moment, beyond the UAE, because there's so much opportunity in Saudi Arabia. They've got Vision 2030. The makeup of the country is very, very different from UAE in terms of obviously population and so forth, and also 80% local rather than 20% expat, as opposed to UAE 90%, 10%, I think, something like that, in terms of the way it is in terms of expat and local things like that. They have a domestic market in Saudi Arabia. They're growing at an enormous rate. So it's a bit going back. It's funny, we've gone back to the start here, but basically a lot of it relates to me coming back to Dubai in 2007 and how it was and how quickly Dubai has changed. You're seeing Saudi now do that. I mean, I've been in Riyadh quite a lot in the last year, and every other corner has a crane or construction going on and things like that. So it's interesting seeing that now opening up in Saudi, and I think the opportunity is huge for there. And then obviously, like we discussed, moving globally as well.
Yeah, so you're seeing that cycle again. So it's been
Absolutely.
a great journey. You've raised money, you're recruiting, you're
still raising money.
Raising money, never ends.
Always.
Global expansion. What else, I guess, as the last point, what can people expect to see from you personally or the business Estee next year?
Well, to be honest with you, what we're trying to do is, because I've said we're trying to, automate processes and things like that, that I think our growth plan, will still be our core business, right? Of the longer term extended stay market. This is our core business. We believe there's enough of a niche. So it's a big niche, and it's a growth niche. But there's a big niche that we can take a nice part of moving forward. So I think overall, if I'm guessing, I'm hoping we'll be in at least 25 countries by the end of 2026. I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but that's what I'm hoping for.
We got to dream big.
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, I really believe in what we're doing. And I think the three of us are determined. I think if we've got the right team in place, we've got some great people at the moment, and I think we can build on that. And if we've got the right team in place and the right tech, I see no reason why we can't be big.
Well, I'll be the support in the journey from afar. I know we're on LinkedIn, so I'll be watching and cheering you on. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today, Mark. It's been great to chat.
No, thank you, Kieran. It's been great. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
And that's the end of the podcast, episode 5 with Mark. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I did recording. And I'll see you next week, episode 6. Make sure you tune in, like, comment, and subscribe.